to Mark, Susan and Ezreal. I hereby state that what I have written here is absolutely true to the best of my memory and my understanding, and it is written without any exaggeration. I can clearly remember before I was born. I was assisted to remember these things by way of visions and dreams, people I met and recognized, and voices and words that I heard. All these things together helped me remember. For example, I said to myself, I am sure I have seen her before, but I cannot remember where. Then I heard a voice which said, she said, so gentle. Thinking about this over several days, I was able to clearly remember what I have written concerning this conversation. I can remember being in heaven and standing behind and in amongst a large crowd of people who stood side by side, about 5 deep, running all the way along both sides of the main street of the town that we lived in. Everyone was waving goodbye and cheering to a large group of people who were walking down the center of the road, moving in the direction from my left to my right. The group of people walking down the center of the road was about 5 or 6 deep in width and stretched for as far as I could see up the road, which had a slight rise to the left. They too were waving and saying goodbye to everyone as they passed by. These people were headed to the place where they would leave heaven and go to experience life on the earth. They were not from our town but were only passing through. After they had passed by, I turned and began to walk back to my little home, which was located only a short distance from the town center where I had been standing. After a short distance, I met Mark, who was also attending the send-off. He was a close friend of mine in heaven, and he decided to join me, and we both walked back to my home. When we arrived at my home, we went inside and sat down. My small home did not have any doors or any main windows. In fact, I cannot remember any homes in our town having any doors. Inside my small home, I had 3 two-seated settees, which were facing each other in an open-ended square with a small table in the center. Mark sat on one settee and I sat on the settee opposite to him. We talked about what had just happened. During the conversation I mentioned to him that I would like to volunteer to go to the earth. I said, sooner or later everyone in our town would be sent to the earth. Mark said that the earth was a very dangerous place and that if I went there I might not come back. He said he knows a friend who knows someone who went to the earth and that person did not come back. He said, the earth is full of dangerous and bad things, and he told me that he did not think it was a good idea for me to volunteer to go there. But I said, if I were to volunteer, they would guarantee me a safe return, but if I was sent there, then there was no guarantee that I would ever come back. We talked some more and then Mark went home. A couple of hours later, I went out of my home and I walked up the main street of our town to the place where the 3 men sat. They were dressed in white and they had long white beards and long white hair. They were seated on wooden chairs with a long narrow wooden table in front of them. This table was situated in the center of the road. I walked up to them and I approached the man sitting on the right side. I told him that I wanted to volunteer to go to the earth. He told me that first he needed to check to see if I was volunteering for the right reasons and that what he was about to do would not hurt me. I agreed and I closed my eyes, and then for a few seconds I sensed that he was reading my thoughts and I was unable to move and I was under his total control. As this was happening I saw lights moving rapidly in my mind. When it was over, he said that he was satisfied that I had come to volunteer for the right reasons. He then asked me a number of questions and then we discussed a lifestyle that I might adopt when I was on the earth. The final decision was left to me and I can remember him offering me an easier lifestyle, but I said, no, I want this one. He said to me that he thought my choice would be a pretty hard life to live, but he left that decision to me. Then we discussed my future parents that I would have on the earth. When he mentioned their names, I saw them in my mind. When an agreement was reached on everything, he said he would come to me in a couple of days' time. Then for a few seconds, as I stood silently in front of him, I thought about what my friend Mark had said to me in my home a few hours earlier. I suddenly lost my confidence and I became concerned about my own safety. So I asked him, "Are you sure you can bring me back safely and that no harm would come to me?" He reassured me as he turned a large book around that was lying open on the table in front of him. He then handed me the large page book and I picked it up keeping the same page that had been opened. He said to me, "The names of all the people that we send to experience life on the earth and the names of all the people that volunteer to go to experience life on the earth are written into this book." He said, "Once your name is written into this book, you cannot die and you have been changed and you have been given power over death." He said, "This book in short is called, the Book of Life, for it is a record of all the people that have gone to experience life on the earth." I looked at the large book that I was holding open and about 2/3 down the left page I saw my name, which read, Peter Bowler. I turned over the page, and saw many more names, and I saw a couple of names that had been crossed off with a line drawn through them. I gave him back the book, and we said goodbye to each other, and then I left not asking him any further questions. After I left the place where I had volunteered, I walked straight home and thought about what I had done. A while later, Suzanne, a friend of mine, came to my home, as she did quite often, to talk to me. I told her that I had volunteered to go to the earth and that I would be leaving heaven in a couple of days. She was standing just outside the entrance to my home and she became noticeably upset and turned and went home. I had only known Suzanne for a short time, but we had become very good friends and I looked forward to seeing her. I first met Suzanne a few weeks before, when I was walking down the road on my way home. As I got near to my home, I walked past my neighbor who was standing on the road, just outside her home. Suzanne, who I had not yet met, was standing on the road next to my neighbor. My neighbor lived on the same side of the road as I did and her home was about 4 homes to the left of my home or to the right if you were looking at my home from the road. Now, without stopping, I said a quick hello and kept walking past them. For some time, I had been developing a problem talking to people and I felt a little bit bad about not stopping to talk to them. I knew I had developed a problem and I knew the cause of the problem, but I was struggling to overcome it. There was a time when I would have stopped and innocently talked for hours to anyone in our town. Anyway, after I had walked past them, my neighbor called out to me and she shouted, "Hey Peter, come here." I turned around and walked back to them. Suzanne was standing closer to the center of the road and next to my neighbor's left side and slightly behind my neighbor. My neighbor said, "This is Suzanne, she is on holidays and she is staying with me." As I said hello to Suzanne, I thought to myself, "She is so beautiful, she is a very beautiful woman unlike any in our town." We talked for a while and then I said goodbye to them and I walked home. The next day Suzanne came to my home and she asked me if she could come inside and talk for a while. I told her, "You can come inside anytime you like, you don't need to ask me." The whole time I knew Suzanne, she would always just stand at the entrance to my home and ask me if she could come inside. She would never just walk into my home without being invited in, even though I repeatedly told her she could just enter whenever she liked. Suzanne would come to see me at least once every day and we would talk for hours. Suzanne was a very good talker. We became very good friends. I remember her saying to me that she really loved my little town. She said, "It was so peaceful here and the people were so nice and so friendly and so gentle." After a couple of weeks, I began to realize that the kingdom of God who watches over us and who provides everything for us, must have sent Suzanne to help me with the problem I was having communicating with people. I was becoming withdrawn and talking to Suzanne was reversing this problem. Now, the next day after I had told Suzanne that I had volunteered to go to the earth, I thought I would go and see a friend of mine, whose name was Ezra, who I had not seen for a long time. So I walked across town to where he was working. He was preparing a welcome home for the people that had gone to the earth some time ago, and now those people were about to return back to heaven. Ezra was responsible and was in charge of organizing this welcome home, and I thought, at the time, that Ezra was doing a job that was very important to our town and that he had a high level of responsibility. This type of work was not something I had ever done before, and I had no confidence in doing it. I arrived at the large hall where he worked and I walked in. As I entered the hall, Ezra greeted me and welcomed me, but I could see that he was very busy organizing 4 or 5 men on what he wanted them to achieve. I told him that I could only stay for the day as I was leaving for the earth, probably tomorrow. He gave a little laugh and then he showed me what he wanted me to do, but I had no experience in such things, and for most of the time I just stood there and watched them work. I can remember thinking, I might have gone there just to see Ezra to help me to try to calm my nerves about my forthcoming trip to the earth. Ezra was good at doing that. At the end of the day, I said goodbye to them and I went home. The next day, the men that I had volunteered to came to my home and I was taken to the place where I left heaven to come to the earth. Everything that I have written here, I can clearly remember. I believe that what I have written is the truth to the best of my knowledge and my understanding. I have tried to only write what I can clearly remember and write this without any exaggeration. The conversations that took place are as close as possible to what I can remember was said and thought at the time. Peter Bowler, Monday, 28th August 2006.